So I have a question for you. Would you rather be alone in the woods with a man or a bear? No, not this kind of bear or this kind of bear. No, a real life gigantic grizzly bear. And what if I told you women on TikTok are choosing bears over men? And I kind of agree with it.
The reality is I would choose the bear, you would choose the bear, we would all choose the bear. Collectively, as the internet is female presenting people, we all would choose the bear.
In today's video, we'll look over bear versus man memes, the discussion over it and how it started, and make some jokes along the way. I hope you enjoy the video. So I'm not chronically online, so when I first saw women in my comment section hyping up bears, I thought I fell asleep and woke up in a new dimension where bears were all of a sudden really hot and attractive.
I need him biblically. I need him in a way that is concerning to feminism. He's so fucking good.
But then I realized that it was a hypothetical on TikTok that men were getting mad at. Would you rather be alone in the woods with a man who's a stranger or a bear? So you guys know me, my head starts spinning, the wheels start turning. I'm like, how did this even happen? How did this discussion even start? Curiosity got the better of me and I started digging. I started searching, and you never guess what I found. And this is very important, will be brought up later. While men are getting mad at women for this hypothetical, women aren't even the people who started the conversation. It was a man on TikTok who started this entire conversation and discourse about it, and it wasn't even a hypothetical to begin with.
The bear or man in the woods thing was never actually a would you rather question. I know because I'm the one who started it. Scared of men. If you're alone in the woods, seeing a man is 10 times scarier than seeing a bear. So if you don't know any misandrists, if you're not friends with any, you actually need to go touch some grass, because like most women are misandrists.
And you know, I had some problems with this guy's video, but like a normal rational adult, if I disagreed with somebody's opinion, I just keep scrolling. But of course, the men in the comment section didn't do this. They needed to consume their rage bait and turn it into an argument. And if you've been on the internet long enough, once men have set a target on something, sooner or later, street interviews will follow. Street interviewers like vultures in the Sahara couldn't wait to sweep down on this carcass of gender war discourse. You know they had to get a video out about it.
Would you rather be stuck in a forest with a man or a bear?
Bear. Man is scary.
With a bear.
So maybe a bear.
Depends what man, but probably a bear.
100% a bear, which is like terrifying to say, but...
And you want to know what's crazy about that? In the first 5 seconds, they put a woman with dyed hair in it who says that she's a misandrist, and it's also a complete accident. It's not like they realize that rage bait is the easiest way to go viral on TikTok, and men are the most easy to enrage. It could never be that they edited out all the women who said that they would choose a man and not a bear instead. Everything you see on the internet is real.
You really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies?
And then after that, you have your internet classic people duetting and stitching the videos, getting mad at the women, even misinterpreting the question just to get off their weird niche interest. And then you have some people who just don't understand analogies, like this guy.
You know what? Let's flip the script. Fellas, would you rather be stuck in the woods with a woman or a bear? Let me know, because I think, you know what? I think I would rather choose the bear, because at least with the bear's not going to just date me for my money and in the divorce take half my stuff or more. Like at first it was questionable. I'm like, dang, what's more scarier, a woman or a bear? Because a woman lies. A woman will lie on you. You know how many football players I've seen get lied on and lose their whole NFL chance and career behind a woman lying, saying they did something they didn't do? Yeah, I think a bear. I'm going bear, bro.
I'm going to explain the analogy later in the video, but notice how even in your analogy, you're still alive and breathing. And with women, their analogy isn't the same, because you understand the hypothetical, but you just don't want to admit it because you're mad. But I'll go over that later in the video. The reason I think this topic is popular because it feeds on a lot of shortcomings on the modern internet. Media literacy, rage bait, and a lack of letting people have a different opinion than yourself.
That's my opinion!
We'll get back to not understanding analogies, rage bait, and not letting people have opinions, but first I want to focus on media literacy.
Y'all acting like men are scarier than bears? You ain't watched enough nature documentaries, baby.
If I asked you who was safer, otters or bears, which would you assume? Oh, look how cute the otters are. They're big eyes. They're cute little whiskers. Oh my God, they're so adorable. Look at the paws. Oh my. Hold on. Hold on, I'm getting a call. You're saying that I'm completely wrong and otters are actually terrible people, and if I went into detail about how bad they were, I would get kicked off of YouTube? Okay. You're saying that if we gave otters the ability to speak human language, the first thing that they would do is start a podcast and talk about how modern otter women are terrible and that we need to return to tradition and talk about otter sandry? Okay. So otters are actually sick and nasty and not cute at all. That's what I'm okay.
Another day, another sea animal gone rogue. This California sea otter has been messing with people for months.
Oh my gosh! It was a cute encounter at first, which turned aggressive real quick.
Bears, on the other hand, are actually pretty cool. But what do I know? I'm just a failed SoundCloud rapper. So let's listen to an actual expert give their opinion.
Wasn't so accurate is that they're really not that interested in attacking people, right? Especially black bears. Black bears are the least predatory of all the bear species. They mostly have a vegetarian diet. They love their fruit. They love their nuts. Another thing people should know is that bears do not eat people. Sometimes it's happened, like really, really rarely, but they do not prey on humans. If a bear is attacking someone, it's really because they perceive that person as a threat. The biggest myth that the media shows about bears is that they're always on the attack. In some of the national parks that have bears, take Yellowstone National Park, your chances of a bear attack are something like 1 in 2 million. So truly, bears are peaceful, they're docile, and with that said, don't bother them, don't frustrate them.
Hello, my name is Emily, as you may or may not know, and today we are going to be talking about peaking.
Don't frustrate them and don't trigger them, because if you do, you might be in trouble.
Bears just have a really bad PR problem. So for the rest of this video, I'm going to put in random nice memes of bears just to cheer up the mood a little bit. I hope you enjoy it. But we needed this context to understand why women are choosing the bear over the man in these situations. And this gets into an important topic about why it's pointless to debate, because they're not actually listening to you. They're too mad to stop and listen. Most women are not saying all men are evil and I would trust a bear over every single man in that situation. No one is saying that bears might not do something. They are saying that bears are not doing it out of malice. They're doing it because either rarely they need food or they feel like they need to defend themselves. They are not going out there to try to hurt you. They leave you alone. Most of the time, bear is watching you and you don't even know that they are watching you. That is like a lot of the case for a lot of wildlife. We don't run into them because they don't want to run into us. That's what I mean about media literacy, is people just don't know how animals work like nowadays for some reason. And this is why you have a lot of conservative men who are out in the wild who understand things are literally saying this exact thing.
I instantly said bear. The day I thought about it, I still said bear. I'll tell you what. My name's John. I was a police officer for 31 years, spent the last 11 in crimes against persons section.
Bear.
How come?
You'd have better chance with the bear because men are evil.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, here, baby. Oh, that's the
Okay, ready?
Come on.
Dude!
Yeah.
There's not a political element to this. I've seen left-wing men and right-wing men both talk about how they would prefer, if they had a daughter, for there to be a bear in the wild instead of a random man. It's not a hard concept to understand or to see where women are coming from. It's just people don't want to see it because they're too angry about it. Unless you're trying to argue that police officers and farmers are now a part of the woke agenda, I guess I just missed the memo. This is not a political statement. Any normal, any rational human can understand the hypothetical and engage with it. They're just choosing not to. And that's why it's pointless to have this discussion, because they don't want to to understand where women are coming from, because if you did, regardless of your political nature, you could understand it. It's not that hard of a concept to understand. And this just plays into the larger concept of the internet not understanding hypotheticals to begin with. Like if I said I want to do jumping jacks on the surface of the sun while drinking Venom juice rather than listen to the new Taylor Swift album, people would understand that I'm not literally saying that. Like it's a device, it's a literary device to get a point across. I ran a poll on this in my community tab and I'll show the results at the end of the video, but suffice to say, a lot of women are not meaning this literally. They're just doing it to prove a point about how they feel around random strangers of men and asking men to stop doing bad behavior. They're not actually meaning it. But we can't even get to that conversation because they refuse to engage in the hypothetical. They're too mad to stop and listen to what people are saying.
Women are choosing the bear because the worst case scenario is way more scary with men than it is with the bear. That's not the point. We know all bears aren't friendly. Sorry. Okay, I'm leaving.
And I want to stick on the mad part because, one, I see a lot of men saying if it was a man versus a bear that they would also pick the bear in a situation, and none of these guys are getting hated for it and nobody really cares about it. Even on the comment section where guys say yes, I would choose bear, there's not really a lot of mean comments from men saying like, no, you don't understand, like you're being misandrous. Like that doesn't happen. And secondly, even if you disagree with women and you find this hypothetical to be stupid, that still doesn't give you the right to make up weird scenarios where women get hurt or injured from a bear. And that's why I don't understand. Like, I disagree with women all the time. For example, and this is a real life story. I was at the start of the astrology, like fascination, like fixation, where it really exploded, like 2016 to 2018. And the amount of people who put astrology into things, there was literally this girl who said, hood guys love astrology girlies because they can tell them based on their horoscope and birth charts where their ops are going to be and how to plan their secret hood missions. And it was one of the most dumbest, stupidest, fake hood suburban tweets I've ever seen in my life. And you know what I did? I just quote tweeted it and was like, you're dumb, and I blocked her because that's a normal response. What's not normal is to fantasize and cook up situations of something bad happening to them because I disagree with what they said. That's not normal. Like that's not a normal human reaction. And so you have guys like this guy who's, I'm an Eagle Scout and I've helped women who are lost, and like, congrats, like that's a good thing. Like I really mean it. I'm not being ironic. Like, thank you for saving those people. However, why are you spending 13 hours arguing with people over their opinion? And this gets back to not understanding the hypothetical because you're so mad. Nobody is saying that there aren't great men that exist that will help you in the woods. The hypothetical is meant to say we are comparing the worst cases of meeting a random man in the woods versus the worst cases of meeting a random bear in the woods. That's it. All of the good men exist and all that doesn't matter. That's not what the hypothetical is comparing. You're just inserting that because you feel a certain way and you feel attacked by it. And I don't understand why.
All collectively as the internet decide to stop acting stupid. Ladies, I get it. I get your point. Men scary, men do bad things, but let strangers on a dating app for 2 days and then invite them over to your house. I don't see y'all taking trips out into the woods where the bears are at, yet y'all choose to be alone with random strange men every other night. Would you rather be alone in the woods with this bear or this man? Would you rather be alone in the woods with this bear or this man? Would you rather be alone in the woods with this bear or this man? And last but not least, would you rather be alone in the woods with this bear or this man? We all know what this man has done in his past. That still shouldn't affect your answer. If y'all didn't choose the man over the bear 4 out of 4 times, you're either delusional or you just flat out lying.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
The fact that you chose Chris Brown really shows that you guys have no understanding of the hypothetical or empathy of the situation, because anybody can think like, oh, like there's some worse things than just not being here anymore. Like being with Chris Brown in a relationship with Chris Brown is 100% worse than whatever you have to do with a bear. But you can't understand that because you're so in your own world that you can't, no, there's no reasoning, there's no logic for you. And then there's guys like this guy.
My mom got mauled by a bear. But you know, I'm a guy, so I decided to take it a step further and ask my mom. Because taking away the bear, she's been through things you wouldn't even possibly begin to imagine. And her answer was, well, the word asinine was thrown around a lot. So if you're asked this question and you take more than a second to come up with the same species as your answer, then honestly, I'm grateful that you've lived such a privileged life that your answer is the bear.
And this one's really weird because later he backtracked and he was so close, like this close to make an apology, and then he just never did it. Like he just stopped. He was like, nah, I don't think so.
It did not. I've been reading everyone's comments and stories and a lot of DMs, and frankly, many of you have had really good insight, and I appreciate it. The original question did strike a very, very niche nerve about someone close to me, and I'm sorry to say my response did not fully consider people's experiences. I should have. Wasn't my intention, but, you know, if people get hurt, it doesn't matter.
I just don't understand getting that mad about something. It's just not that serious. Like, let people have their opinions about things. When women say things I don't agree with, I just like, oh, that's dumb, and go about my day. And that's why I said earlier that it's not a political thing. There are left-wing men and right-wing men who understand a hypothetical and agree, or don't even care and think it's just dumb internet discourse, and would rather watch their NBA team lose a game because their coach can't keep his hands out of his pockets or call a timeout when there's a 9-point run. I don't understand the type of person who can sit on the internet and hyperfixate on a conversation and disagree with people's opinions. And you're hurting your own cause because there are some women who are on the fence about the man versus bear situation and who to pick or whatever. And then they saw how angry you got in your reaction and they chose to pick the bear. Not all women agree with it. This is my poll, and suffice to say, my audience is really passionate about women's topics. So this is skewed. Even in my audience with a lot of women who are passionate, it's basically 70-30. It's probably 60-40 in a broader audience. Because you can't control your emotions and you have to get mad, you are showing that 40% of women that maybe they chose wrong. I just want you to think about that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Click here for the next one. Have a great day. Peace. The Drake versus Kendrick beef was a historic moment in rap history, filled with amazing lyrics and amazing songs. And it also taught us a valuable lesson. Y'all treat allegations like punchlines.
I'm gonna strike a chord and it's probably A minor.
I'm gonna lightly cover a lot of heavy topics in this video, so if that's not for you, maybe click off. And secondly, I'm not trying to cancel anyone. If you like the music, I like the songs, it's perfectly fine. I'm more so talking about how the fan bases and the artists themselves treat allegations. And then lastly, let's just assume all the allegations are true between both parties. Drake is weird with women, Kendrick puts hands on women. Just for the sake of the argument, I'll make this video go a lot smoother, okay? Let's start here. If everything about Drake is true, then why are you guys making music with him?
Crush. He's not my crush. Okay. Let me get that straight. He's like a brother. He's a brother. I met Amboy and I was such a fangirl that and honestly we text all the time now. He helps me with everything, like just life lessons. He's amazing. He's a great human being.
If Drake is some master manipulator, some king of toxic people, and everything about him from Millie Bobby Brown to him going to high school girl basketball games is true, then why do all of you tolerate him? Secondly, if all of it's true, why is the only time you bring it up in a rap beef? Same thing to Drake. If Kendrick is really doing that to his wife, if he's really this false idol, not some woke hero, woke savior, then why did you want to do a feature with him? The answer obviously is that you don't really care about these allegations. You're just using them as a good punchline for the end of a bar, for an end of a diss. Neither of these people really care about these allegations. Kendrick especially does not care at all and is a hypocrite. And I'll get to that in a second. You can see this obviously and most hypocritically in Family Matters, where Drake calls out Kendrick for DV and yet still shouts out Chris Brown in the same song. You don't really care about this. For Kendrick, it's even worse because despite his best efforts, he's portrayed as some savior of the black community, the second coming, the savior of rap. He even plays into it a lot of the time when he calls Drake a culture vulture and say that he represents the culture, that he's the hero of the culture and all those things. And if you go to Meet the Grams, it sounds all dark, eerie and scary and like it's a true crime type of feel, and like he's the hero exposing all the evils in rap.
We gotta raise our daughters knowing there's predators like him lurking. Fuck a rap battle, he should die so all of these women can live with a purpose. I've been in this industry 12 years. I'ma tell y'all one little secret. There's some weird shit going on and some of these artists be here to police it. They be streaming.
And it sounds really good. It sounds like a really good narrative until you remember that he did a song with Kodak Black, who was convicted of the same thing he says Drake is bad for doing.
Alright, so this just happened. Look, so Kodak Black has reportedly pleaded guilty in South Carolina after striking a plea deal with prosecutors. According to the Post and Courier, the 23-year-old rapper agreed to plead guilty to first-degree assault and battery in exchange for 18 months of probation in a court hearing.
Kodak Black admitted to being guilty for doing essay against a high schooler. That is true. The same age range that Drake is being accused of, Kodak literally did it, was found guilty. It's proven. It's not debatable. Kendrick did a song with him. Secondly, Kendrick has defended people who have been accused of bad things. R. Kelly, X. Kendrick does not care about this. He doesn't. But he plays into it like the savior complex. It's a good angle on Drake if he paints him as this horrible person and that Kendrick is here to save the day. And so what you have is like two men accused of things, both going after each other with accusations. And see, here's the thing. I can enjoy that song with Kendrick and Kodak because I separate the music from the artist. I know that's not a popular take online. And the reason that that's not a popular take online is because everybody deludes themselves into thinking that the artists that they like are perfect people, and then they virtue signal like, oh my God, I like Kendrick, rap savior, a progressive ally who also does songs with guys convicted of SA. So, you know, everybody pretends that their artist that they like is perfect and not cancelable, or like terrible people, or even good people who might have done bad things. The reason I bring this up is because you see the same attitude of treating allegations as punchlines in the fan bases themselves, especially in the Kendrick fan base. I don't think this is a hot take to say that Kendrick's fan base is more political or progressive. And this is the reason I'm making this video, because the way that they treat Kendrick's allegations is so different from any other man that they would treat, because they are a fan of him and they agree somewhat with what he says in his music. The reason that it sounds like I'm defending Drake is because Kendrick fans keep saying stuff like this. Like, no, like it's actually not okay if his wife stays with her and he's still beating her. Like, what are you saying? For both parties, there are evidence against what they're accused of. We have video evidence and interviews for Drake with Millie Bobby Brown and other women. And for Kendrick, we have his music that he's admitted to doing some stuff. Recently, the OVO sleuth hunters, the OVO private investigator, there's some allegations from 2014 in the Breakfast Club of Kendrick doing the same type of behavior.
Yeah. When they said you were in Vegas and you beat some guy bloody and you did something to some female, and they said they had evidence and all of this, and then I never heard anything about it again.
Yeah, because it's foolishness.
Either way, and I will willingly admit that Drake has more evidence on his side, but that should not matter. You cannot believe one set of allegations and not for the other person. Somebody put this in my comments perfectly. If a woman accused Drake, she wouldn't be believed, but when Kendrick does it, all of a sudden everybody is just taking it as a fact. When Meg Thee Stallion dissed Drake, people said she was bitter, she was just lying, she was mad at him for what he said on that one record. Megan's diss towards Drake gets completely erased in this discussion, and everybody just believes Kendrick. Then goes back to my point, is that the allegations themselves does not matter. What really matters is the person who's saying it and the hatred towards the other person. And so let's get back to Kendrick's allegations. Kendrick's allegations are not believed simply because they like him as a person. Any other person that had similar allegations towards Kendrick and even the slightest bit of evidence, they would not give him this much leeway. They would not. But it doesn't matter because they like Kendrick. I even had people in my comments saying, if somebody put their hands on women, they should be given $1 million in album sales. Do you hear yourself? And mind you, if it was like a Manosphere guy or whatever, I'd be like, you know, that's like par for the course. You are supposedly like a progressive person. Like, you are supposedly like this woke ally towards women and other minority. Like, what are you doing? But again, this is why I talk about fake woke hating. Like, you don't really care about the allegations. Realistically, if it wasn't Drake, you wouldn't care. I know that because a lot of Kendrick fans let him do the song with Kodak and didn't really care at the time. But because it's Drake and you already hate Drake and you want him out of here, you pretend to care about the allegations, just like how Kendrick pretends to care about the allegations. You pretend to care about them to get Drake out of here. It's the same behavior, and that's why it's so annoying to me. And it's the same with Drake. Like, Drake does not care about DV allegations. He's friends with Chris Brown. They patched it up. He's friends with other people who are accused of DV and not found guilty. He doesn't care about it. He just knows that Kendrick's image is of this savior to black people, and he wants to damage that in some way, and that's why he's saying it. He doesn't care. He would have done a song with him. He invited him to do the Third Person record. He doesn't really care either. It's just, again, punchline. How do I damage you publicly? I don't really care about women. I'm just using them as a pawn in this game of PR. And I think that's bad. And I don't think people who listen to the songs and like the songs are bad people. If you believe both allegations from both artists, then you're fine in my book as well. But one side who believes no allegations from the other side, even though they both have evidence to them, or think that their guy is winning when realistically they're just both bad people. It's so emblematic of our current culture. It's so symbolic of our current culture of people pretending to care about things just to cancel someone else, or nah, I wouldn't even cancel is a weird word, or to ruin someone's reputation. Here's a better word, to ruin someone else's reputation. If you care about DV, you should want people who do DV to be arrested, serve time in prison, get rehabilitated, not get millions of album sales making a song about how he was a terrible partner to his wife and now he's better. Like, what does that mean? Like, you would not have this argument for anything else. What are these comments? People are pretending to care if Drake is a deadbeat father or not, even though some of their favorite musicians never talk to their children or support them. Kendrick also pretends that being a deadbeat father is bad, even though he's friends and does music with Future, who never talks to his kids and is an absent father. Kendrick pretends to care about saving women in the rap music industry, even though he never spoke out about Diddy and what Diddy did. Speaking of Diddy, most people in the rap music didn't believe Cassie when she came forward with the allegations against him. They only started to care when it came out that he might be LGBT. All of a sudden it was like, whoa, we need to protect the kids. Oh no, we better lock him up. You don't care about that. You're just mad that he's LGBT now. It's insane. Like, you know, at least have like some standard to like when you care about allegations and when you don't. It's just weird to me. I could not imagine living my life like this way. For me personally, I tend to wait till we have evidence to make judgments on people. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Click here for the next one. Have a good day. Peace.
Hello, Napoleon. You're quite good at turning me on.
You should probably ignore that.
One thing the ninja's famous for, I want to point out, is what is known as a death touch. The ability to hit someone, leave no bruise, no mark whatsoever, and yet kill them.
It sounds like a James Bond movie, you realize.
Well, the ninjas were the James Bonds of Japan.
Kept you waiting, huh? In the world of video games, Hideo Kojima is an auteur. That's French for pretentious. One of the most recognizable and successful designers of all time. He has made a career out of ripping off more movies than the Pirate Bay. His level of stardom is such that it affords him the creative freedom to design characters with names like Die Hard Man, or a female soldier who looks more like a stripper that wandered into an NRA convention, and somehow he keeps getting work. Kojima's best title is arguably Metal Gear Solid 3. I say arguably as anyone who's allowed to use the stove unsupervised knows the real answer is MGS1, and I'll fight you if you try and tell me any different. But in a universe filled with vampire soldiers, cyber ninjas, clones of clones of clones, and telepathic gremlins or whatever, MGS3 is a standout title simply for having an actual well-thought character arc for its main antagonist, the boss. I will now ask Napoleon to attempt the Sisyphean task of summing up a Kojima storyline in 2 paragraphs or less.
The boss is a legendary soldier who, in the crazy world of Hideo Kojima, was pivotal in winning the Battle of Normandy for the Allies and turning the tide of World War II. She's the mentor and friend of your character, Naked Snake, who is also known as Big Boss, and not to be confused with Solid Snake, who was a clone of Big Boss, or Liquid Snake, who is the brother of Solid Snake and is also a clone of Big Boss, but evil and also dead, but lives on in the surgically reattached hand of Revolver Ocelot, who was the boss's illegitimate child and ultimately forms a terrorist group called the Sons of Liberty with Solidus Snake, not to be confused with Solid Snake, because Solidus Snake is actually the president of the United States, who is also a clone of Big Boss.
Snake, are you okay? Snake? Snake!
Okay, so while the plot of the Metal Gear universe has more shocking twists than a dominatrix specializing in ball torture, to cut a ridiculous story short, this legendary American soldier, the Boss, defects to the USSR during the Cold War. and not the modern-day Cold War, the classic one you remember from Call of Duty Black Ops. You track her down, kill her, and save the day. But only afterwards is it revealed that the boss never actually defected. She had been ordered by her superiors to defect to get on the inside of the USSR and stop the development of a very anime type of nuclear weapon. The boss was so far undercover that in death, she sacrificed her name and reputation in service to her country. The public would never know that in truth, this traitor, who traded everything for which the United States stands for communal farming and informing on your neighbor, had died as one of the greatest American patriots. Frank Dukes is a soldier, spy, sexual dynamo, and greatest martial artist of all time. He's the man who gave us his true life story in the form of 1998's greatest movie, Bloodsport. And I know what you're thinking right now, and the answer is, yeah, believe it or not, Bloodsport is allegedly a true story.
Meet Frank Dukes, the first American to win the Kumite, a deadly martial arts competition where the only rule is to win.
He's been the subject of innumerable documentaries, interviews, and articles, but as the years pass, Dukes has become somewhat of a laughingstock, as claim after claim of his is debunked. But the more I learn about Dukes, the more I begin to wonder, is he less Solid Snake and more the boss? A legendary soldier whose actions were so covert that he is doomed to be considered a fraud, thanks to the fact that his work can never be revealed publicly. I mean, aside from that one time he wrote a book detailing them in great length, but aside from that, this video aims to answer the question, is Frank Dukes the secret man, the greatest American ninja, elite soldier, CIA spook, child slavery abolitionist, Kumite-winning patriot of all time? Without a good backstory, there's no compelling reason for any hero or villain to exist. Frodo wants to destroy the One Ring out of an innate desire to rid Middle-earth of the evil that has corrupted his beloved Uncle Bilbo. Batman's parents are dead, and he never shuts up about it. And Jeff Monson sprang to life as if from a genie's lamp, out of a deep desire to see people fornicate without any financial strings attached. Frank Dukes' origin story begins in 1956 in the ice-blasted, frigid hellscape of Toronto, Canada. But it's really boring, so let's skip ahead to when the interesting shit starts. In 1996, Dukes wrote this: The Secret Man, an ancient tome that chronicles his life, his loves, and all the top-secret missions he blundered his way through en route to becoming the world's greatest soldier, spy, martial arts, CIA, Green Beret karate champion of the world. For research purposes, and also because I paid 30 whole euros for the literary equivalent of a Creed Greatest Hits album and want to get my money's worth, I'll be basing a lot of my observations on Frank's life and deeds from his very own autobiographical fan fiction. Like most kids, Duke started training in martial arts as a way out of being bullied. A skinny Jewish kid living in a rough neighborhood in California, Dukes wanted to learn to defend himself, but after his first loss at a judo tournament, we almost lost the greatest martial arts career of all time before it had even begun. In the locker room post-tournament, a despondent Dukes struggled to hold back his tears of rage and frustration and considered giving up altogether. It's at this point that anyone who has seen the other chronicle of the life and times of Dukes, Bloodsport, will notice a significant diverging of his origin mythos. In Bloodsport, Dukes is introduced to the world of martial arts after his gang of pizza-faced preteen hoodlums attempt to steal a sword from the home of legendary martial arts instructor Senzo Tiger Tanaka. And not just any sword, this is the Kumite sword, a priceless, irreplaceable loot drop you get after beating like 300 other guys in unarmed combat. But in The Secret Man, this never happens. Senzo Tanaka ghost dads his way into the locker room, materializing like the referee in IK Plus, and offering the kind of wisdom that only stereotypical, borderline mystical old Asian men can. And while I get that stealing a priceless artifact that Senzo probably picked up in Narita Airport's duty-free section is a bit more Hollywood than him kinda creepily appearing in the boys' locker room.
I see you working with the young kids. Do you have a favorite kind of spot for the younger ones?
It's just one of many, many inconsistencies we'll find in the Frank Dukes story. After their vaguely creepy locker room introduction, Dukes began his ninja training with Tanaka. But for a legendary martial arts instructor, Senzo Tanaka is more elusive than the ghost of D.B. Cooper. Despite his status as an alleged Kumite winner and head of the Koga Yamabushi School of Ninjutsu, Tanaka is more underground than the average sub-pop artist. Dukes is the only martial artist to ever claim to have trained with him.
Shidoshi Tanaka trained me.
What's the whole up?
And despite being a supposedly world-famous martial artist, there is not a single dojo, school, or cardio kickboxing class affiliated with him. Finding information on Tanaka has practically become its own cottage industry, with people making hour-long videos and digging through more complex lineages than Genghis Khan just to try and prove this man actually existed.
However, I can prove, because of your last episode with Michael Bisping, that Senzo Tanaka is absolutely a real person.
One of the things you'll notice about Dukes if you do even surface-level digging is his obsession with James Bond.
This sounds like a James Bond movie, you realize.
Well, the ninjas were the James Bonds of Japan.
People inspired me at that time. Well, one was inspiration was Sean Connery in the James Bond series. That my ego. You're a young man, you know. You see a guy, oh, he's getting all the girls, fancy cars, you know, adventure, excitement, never loses. And so that, in my visualization, had said, well, that's who I want to be when I grow up.
Written his own biography entitled The Secret Man. I want you to meet a real-life James Bond, folks, Frank Dukes. Come on, Frank. There he is. Oh, my gosh, he's got a Bond girl. How are you? Good to see you. How you doing? Come on in. I think the man is going for a martini in the old Bond fashion with a Bond girl. Shaken, not stirred.
If you're a spy, what are you doing on TV telling everyone you're a spy? The idea of being a spy is that your life is secret and nobody knows about it. So what is this?
One place you can find Senzo Tanaka is in the James Bond movie You Only Live Twice. In it, a man named Senzo Tiger Tanaka commands an army of ninjas. Dukes explained this bizarre coincidence by stating that despite being more underground than the fucking sandworms of Arrakis, somehow Ian Fleming had heard all about Tanaka and based his Bond villain on the real-life Senzo. It's taken 30 years of digging just to verify that, yes, there was a man named Senzo Tanaka who lived and died in California at roughly the same times as Dukes claims. Tanaka came from an area of Japan called Kumamoto, which has historical links to a practice called Yamabushi, which is indeed very similar sounding to Koga Yamabushi, the branch of ninjutsu Dukes claims he trained. But before any Dukes fans among you break out the champagne and hand lotion, the only problem is, Yamabushi is literally a form of meditation and mountain worshipping practiced by monks of that region.
山伏っていうのはそうですね、修験道は法的な考えがミックスされて、できた宗教なんですけれども、山伏というのはその山に伏してというふうに要する、修験道の、坊さんと言ったらいいか、行者。
Not a single mountain hugger interviewed here was capable of performing the Dim Mak, or even aware of what a Dim Mak is. In 1980, Frank wrote a manuscript titled Ninja, The Untold Story. It's 160 pages of ninja fanfiction, yet somehow manages to be more painfully dull than having a limb amputated with a spoon. Dukes does, however, spend a significant allotment of the story performing literary fellatio on Senzo Tanaka. The list of Tanaka's accomplishments are truly inspirational. Let's take a look at a few examples and try to rate their credibility. At age 16, he took part in the Russo-Japan War. This 16-year-old Tanaka killed enough high-ranking Russian officers to make Joseph Stalin feel inadequate. Famous Russian lunatic Rasputin prophesied the coming of Senzo Tanaka. As it was prophesied, Tanaka ninja'd his way into the court of Tsar Nicholas II, beheaded his mistress, and left her head in his bed. Tanaka pulled a lethal weapon and was kicked out of the Japanese intelligence services during World War II for being a loose cannon who didn't do things by the book. He moved to San Francisco where he ninja'd the fuck out of the entire Chinese mafia. According to Dukes, Senzo was regarded as the most famous ninja of his day, which seems about as useful as being the best guitarist in Nickelback or the hottest man on the Isle of Lesbos. The most interesting thing about this manuscript, once you cast aside all its bullshit and flim-flammery, is not what it tells you, but what it fails to tell you. Despite listing everything from high-profile assassinations to the heft and texture of his bowel movements, not once does Frank mention that Senzo was a Kumite champion, which seems like a glaring oversight given the importance of the Kumite in Frank and Senzo's lives. Is it possible that Senzo Tanaka really was a legendary ninja and part of a lineage stretching back 40 generations? Yes, but unlikely. There is, however, a far more plausible scenario. The real-life Tanaka would have been a 70 or even 80-year-old man when he met Frank Dukes. And as old men are wont to do, he likely told a young and impressionable boy stories. Tales of his homeland, where an ancient clan of priests offer silent prayers to a mountain deity who returns nothing but a cavernous silence of its own, and whispers of warriors unseen, hiding in the hills, were used to quell unruly children. Behave Yourself, or the invisible warriors, the shadow dancers of the sacred mountain will come and take you away. And maybe Frank enjoyed those stories just a little too much. Xenophanes was an ancient Greek philosopher who posited the notion that if horses and oxen could learn to draw, they would draw the gods as horses and oxen. If Frank Dukes drew a picture of God, he would be wearing black pajamas and swinging a katana.
What ninja means someone whose spirit and skill is sharper than the edge of a blade.
Regardless of how Frank met Senzo, theirs was a love that bloomed on the battlefield. Senzo's nephews eventually got bored of ninja LARPing and went to do fun teenager things like squandering the gift of youth and dry humping. With no other competition for his affections, Frank was free to bask in Senzo's full attention, and bask he did. According to Dukes' ancient ninja manuscript, Tanaka knew he was dealing with not just any teenager, but with the true heir to 40 generations of ninja cosplay. It's safe to say Senzo picked up a real ninja vibe coming off this kid, which may partially explain why, between the ages of 14 to 16, Senzo's training crossed over the border into full-on child endangerment, as Frank was made to do live fighting with real bladed weapons, fought a Green Beret, and had to have stakes strapped to his legs and get chased by a hungry Akita. So after 2 whole years of training,
What's the whole up?
he took someone else's teenage son on an unsupervised trip to, and I quote, the legendary ninja land of Masuda, which is odd as you would likely expect them to go to Kumamoto, seeing as that's where 40 fucking generations of Senzo's ninja great-grandparents lived. But whatever, maybe his ninja teleport abilities were a little off that day.
So, what is this?
At Masuda, the 16-year-old Frank learns every single ninja technique in the fucking ninja book, and then challenges the entire Koga clan for the right to be called ninja. I'm not making this up or exaggerating. This is legitimately all in Frank's manuscript. A 16-year-old Canadian challenges an entire clan of ninjas in the middle of a ninja village for the right to become a ninja. And again, I quote, the boy's abilities shocked and pleased the ninja community, and he was awarded, in front of the entire Koga clan, the title of ninja. Having mastered the ninja arts before he had even mastered growing facial hair, Dukes moved on to the next arc of the Frank Dukes cinematic universe, his military career. My name is Frank Dukes. I was in Vietnam. I hold the record for most Vietnamese killed with a single roundhouse kick. It's 56. That was in 1993, and they still haven't let me back into the country. Frank's accomplishments as the greatest Canadian ninja are only matched by his military record.
Tell that dipshit to get fucked.
Dukes is the owner of more medals, ribbons, and awards than the average Call of Duty lobby. If you can name a country, there's a better than average chance Frank has fought there, or conducted a covert operation, or maybe just banged a really hot chick there.
Ain't not like a piece of pussy.
Because if the secret man is to be believed, Frank Dukes is slinging more pipe than legendary sexual hobgoblin Ishida Kim. Dukes is an awardee of the Navy Cross, Silver Star, Bronze Star, Distinguished Service Cross, Navy Marine Corps Medal, Purple Heart, Medal of Honor, and Medal of Honor Allied Assault. In an issue of Black Belt magazine from 1980, Dukes revealed that he even received awards for his knife fighting skills in active combat in Southeast Asia.
Y'all take a good look at this lump of shit.
His missions were so covert that even his awarding of the Medal of Honor had to be done in a secret ceremony.
All of us have taken an oath that we cannot get too much into the details by reason of the fact of security concerns, but he was into special operations and then, of course, operating with other government agencies.
He's a Vietnam veteran who conducted secret missions in Laos as part of Operation Sanction. In a tale straight out of an 80s Nam movie, Dukes was the sole survivor of his entire team, though he didn't exactly escape unscathed. He was lucky to make it out alive, limping across the border into Thailand after receiving several bayonet wounds in his stomach and shrapnel in his back.
Everybody gotta die sometime, Red.
He worked for the CIA, NSA, FBI, and NordVPN. Speaking of NordVPN, fuck NordVPN. Frank's military and intelligence career is shrouded in more mystery than the pyramids of Giza. In order to try and make sense of it all, we need to start at the beginning.
Bob, I got a bad feeling on this one, all right? I got a bad feeling.
My name is Frank Dukes. I was in Vietnam. There was no parade for me when I came home. Nobody called me a hero, aside from the articles I wrote about myself. But life isn't gonna just hand you the Medal of Honor, so I awarded it to myself. What we do know for indisputable fact, thanks to a Freedom of Information request from militaryphony.com, is that in 1975, at the age of 18 and only 2 years after becoming King of the Ninjas, Frank enlisted in the Marine Corps Reserves. He attained the rank of Lance Corporal, and his primary duty for his entire military career is listed as wireman, which is someone who repairs communications equipment. His active duty only lasted 130 days, ending in October of 1975. The lines begin to blur when Dukes himself supplies a copy of his discharge papers, which show Basic Intelligence Man listed as his primary duty rather than wireman. This was investigated by military phony, who were able to confirm that Frank did indeed have basic intelligence training, but the kind of advanced intelligence training one might need to get into the CIA or FBI is nowhere to be seen. The reveal of Frank as having basic intelligence training might seem like a rare W for him, as it lends credibility to his tales of special forces, Green Beret, James Bond, covert missions, and licking strawberry jam off a woman's foot in the middle of a restaurant, which is actually a thing in his book, and I swear to God I'm not making up something as stomach-churning as that. But once we dig a little deeper, things fall apart faster than a Tony v. Habib main event. The first and most glaringly obvious structural flaw in Frank's House of Lies are his Vietnam stories. Numerous articles describe him as a Vietnam veteran, and even in his own book, he describes someone as an old buddy from Nam. But unless his recruitment office was a heavily modified DeLorean, it's impossible for Frank to be a Vietnam veteran, given that the war ended in 1973 and he enlisted in 1975. While GIs were busy dying face down in the mud, Frank was face down in Senzo's backyard, LARPing as Ninja Jesus. When this was pointed out, Frank immediately cast Reflect, claiming that he never said he was in Vietnam, but Southeast Asia as part of a special operations group on secret missions after the war had ended. But the actual special operations group that operated in Southeast Asia, known as the MACV SOG, had been disbanded by 1975. Duke's status as a permanent resident in the biggest land of make-believe since Middle-earth was confirmed when his military records showed that he had never left the United States at any point during his service. The next sandcastle to soccer kick was that of Frank's medals. The Medal of Honor is the highest award in the United States military, yet it was awarded to Frank in a top-secret hush-hush ceremony so as not to blow his cover, which, if true, would likely be the one and only time in history that the US military has ever awarded any medal of any description, let alone its top honor, in secret. The military aren't like the fucking Dragonborn, covertly sneaking their highest honor into someone's back pocket while attempting to pickpocket them. Sheldon Lettich, director of Bloodsport, dim-macked Frank's Medal of Honor claims in a particularly brutal fashion. Frank also used to tell me, and just about everyone he spoke to, that he had participated in secret missions for the CIA and the US military, and that he had won the Medal of Honor for his heroism. He even showed me the medal, which he had supposedly been awarded by the president. Years afterwards, when numerous people began questioning his stories, he stopped claiming that he won the medal, and then began claiming that he'd never told anyone he won it. He even tried to convince me that he'd never told me he won the medal, or that he'd even shown it to me. But by then his entire house of cards had collapsed, and nearly everyone knew he was just a delusional daydreamer and a big bullshitter. It's also pretty important to note that Frank claimed he was awarded the Purple Heart, which is given to soldiers injured in battle, yet no mention of the injuries or the medal appear in his records. Without those, It would make it impossible for a veteran to receive the proper care from the Veterans Administration when they're discharged. Hence, there is a very good reason why these medals aren't awarded in secret or scrubbed from a soldier's DD-214. The only record of Dukes being injured while on active duty was described in the book Stolen Valor, when Frank apparently fell off a truck he was painting, which might be secret code for assassinating a battalion of Viet Cong using only the dim mak, but is more than likely just Frank falling off a truck. The covert operation in which Frank allegedly received his Purple Heart, Operation Sanction, is also about as realistic as my chances with Valentina Shevchenko. Oh shit, this is really happening. Play it cool, play it cool. Don't mention the spin kick, don't mention the spin kick. Hey girl. What was with that spin kick? Operation Wolf has more credibility than Operation Sanction. No one has ever heard of or found any records pertaining to Operation Sanction outside of Frank's big book of erotic military fan fiction. Oh, and Frank's claim that he won awards for his knife fighting skills? Yeah, those awards don't exist. The military is about as likely to give you an award for lightsaber skills as they are for knife fighting skills. But what about all those Vietnam photos and footage of Frank? They're from a short movie directed by Sheldon Lettich called Firefight. But if his medals are all make-believe, explain this photo, Napoleon, you draft-dodging hippie, I hear you say, probably. When it was pointed out that Frank is wearing a mixture of Marine and Army medals in this photo, which is something that would never happen, he backpedaled and claimed this isn't actually a photo of him in uniform, it's simply a hilarious Halloween costume. So in amongst all the sexy cats, sexy nurses, and whatever the fuck this monstrosity is, Frank was there in sexy full dress uniform. My name is Frank Dukes, and as it turns out, I actually wasn't in Vietnam. I was, however, injured by a standard military issue M880 4x4 truck, possibly because it was a heavily disguised Viet Cong transformer.
Throwing frag.
At this point, Frank's military claims have seen more poked holes than a teenage disco. A simple Freedom of Information request to see his DD-214 drops the hammer of dawn on the vast majority of his claims, as one single piece of paper proves that he never left the US and was never awarded any medals. And without that, all Frank has is some communications repair training and a budding career at Radio Shack. But what of Frank's other claims? That of being the titular secret man, the CIA's finest operative.
Значит, он мне, конечно, конкретно он не рассказывал, но так, в общем, говорил, что это человек с большой буквы, так он его называл. Человек с большой буквы, необычайной силы, воли, характера стойкого, но целеустремленный, такой, который может выполнить эту задачу, потому что это обычный человек не в состоянии, ему это не под силу, ни физически, ни интеллектуально, это должен быть.
In 1996, Frank detailed his life's work for the CIA in his magnum opus, The Secret Man, a novel that aims for James Bond but lands squarely on Navy SEAL copy pasta.
You think you can get away with saying that shit to me over the internet? Think again, fucker.
And at the risk of turning this video into a book review, I'm about to review this book, because if my life has to be made marginally worse by its existence, then so does yours. The Secret Man is a 316-page Jason Bourne fanfic written by someone who's only ever seen the one with Hawkeye in it.
So unpredictable, I gotta tell
you.
In The Secret Man, Frank comes across like Forrest Gump with a military fetish. Somehow, Frank just happens to be present at all of the most incredible moments in Covert Ops history. By the end, I was almost expecting him to make an appearance at the Shadow Moses incident. If even 1/10 of this book is true, then Frank is legitimately the most badass human on the planet.
You're fucking dead, kid. I can be anywhere, anytime, and I can kill you in over 700 ways, and that's just with my bare hands.
The Secret Man's exploits contain, but are not limited to, Frank gets recruited into the CIA at age 19 in a public restroom. He hunts a serial killer who is in league with a big restaurant to murder street children because they were begging outside and made the restaurants look bad. Tracks down a Russian bioweapon that targets people based on their race. Is made a captain in the Russian army. Uses sleeping gas on someone's dog. Licks strawberry jam off a woman's foot in the middle of a restaurant. Gets into a deadly shootout with undercover KGB agents in downtown LA. Sells his Kumite sword to save the lives of a ship full of orphaned kids who were kidnapped by pirates. Travels the globe meeting sketchy underworld characters in dive bars to shake them down for information. Blows up a fuel dump while fighting communists in Nicaragua. Blows up a chemical weapons plant in Iraq. And spends 3 days in a hotel room banging the hottest woman you can possibly imagine. You know who I'm talking about. That woman that you're obsessed with. You follow her on Instagram, where you like every single photo she posts, occasionally getting the courage to comment, "Looking good," after you've had a couple of beers, and then spend the next day with the nervous shits, worrying about whether or not it was a good idea. Well, now picture her, Frank Dukes, an unlimited room service strawberry jam, locked in a hotel room for 3 days. 3 whole days.
All I can tell you is I'm not the type of guy who kisses and tells, and I took an oath, and I plan on obeying that oath.
The Secret Man gives you more ridiculousness to unpack than a joke shop warehouse. And if you don't know what a joke shop is, see, in the 1980s we didn't have jokes of our own, so we bought jokes from actual physical shops. But that's not important right now. What is important is that literally every one of those claims, from the strawberry jam incident to rescuing orphans from pirates, are all true stories, allegedly. But most of these stories fall apart under even the slightest bit of scrutiny. I can't find a single report of a fatal shootout between the FBI and undercover KGB agents in downtown LA in broad daylight, despite the fact that it would have caused an international incident and sounds like the prologue for Red fucking Dawn. But I guess it was just too covert. And unless the Kumite sword is made from a solid gold unicorn horn glued to a copy of Half-Life 3, most Somali pirates wouldn't trade a ship full of valuable orphans for one. Like the majority of Frank's life, the tales found within The Secret Man are ridiculous to the point of being a middle finger to your intelligence. But Frank dismisses the lack of evidence to back up any of his whimsical bullshit by saying, "It was a secret." The Secret Man commits the cardinal sin of any book. It's more painful to read than a eulogy for a beloved pet. For a globe-trotting tale of espionage, sex, and secret missions, I spent most of my time reading this book fighting a covert war of my own against sleep. Putting all of Frank's bullshit aside for a second, if The Secret Man was an Andy McNab novel, it would probably be one of the better ones, which is what we call damning with faint praise. The best part of The Secret Man is, unsurprisingly, the part you don't have to read. Midway through the most insane narrative outside of a Sutter Kane novel, Frank gives us photographic evidence of his life as an even hornier James Bond. It starts with photos of him breaking boards and doing a death touch on an inanimate object before moving on to photos of his covert ops, which look suspiciously like stock photos of military operations. Photos so small that I could realistically claim they're photos of me on a secret operation to destroy the You'd Be Surprised master tapes, and you'd have a pretty tough time disproving it. The one photo where Frank is clearly visible, titled as Down in the Trenches in 1983, also looks suspiciously like a still from the short movie Firefight. But the best is saved for last, when we're introduced to Frank, the chameleon, master of disguise. Everything from wearing sunglasses and a cheap wig, to wearing a fake mustache over your real mustache, to puffing your cheeks out a bit, are all CIA-sanctioned field disguises for use by the elite covert op on the go. After publication, secret agents were crawling out of the woodwork to distance themselves from Frank Dukes. In August of 1996, Soldier of Fortune magazine published an article about Dukes and the Secret Man, brutally titled Full Mental Jacket. In the literary equivalent of being pulled apart by horses, Soldier of Fortune spoke to a number of people Dukes claimed were covert ops workmates of his, and systematically destroyed any lingering shred of credibility Dukes may have had. Actual real-life, non-fantasy SEAL Team Commander Larry W. Simmons was talked into writing the foreword for the book, as both he and Dukes had the same literary agent, but upon publication, Simmons tried to have his name removed from it. He said, "As soon as I read the first few pages, I knew I'd been deceived into lending credibility to a fraudulent endeavor. He is not an American warrior, he is a con man." Dukes also made claims about General John Singlob, saying they had met at a Covert Ops Expo in 1993. And as a brief aside here, having an expo for Covert Ops like it's Comic-Con with night vision goggles seems a bit counterproductive for people trying to keep a low profile, but whatever. Singlob claimed to have never even met Frank and said, "You know, it's an insult to your intelligence, on the subject of special operations, to think that this guy Dukes could say he's involved in these things." Singlob also described the book as virtually a complete fabrication. He had his lawyers call the book's publisher and demanded it be removed from publication. Robert Gates, then deputy of the CIA, said, "I never heard of this guy, and no one I know in the intelligence community ever heard of him." And in an unusual move for the CIA, they made a public statement denouncing any links between them and Dukes. CIA spokesman Mark Mansfield said, "Mr. Dukes' book is sheer fantasy. He was never employed by or affiliated with the CIA."
So, what is this?
When Soldier of Fortune contacted Dukes to ask for clarification of the events of his book, Dukes claimed he couldn't answer any questions because it would endanger him and his family, despite the fact that he had just written a 316-page book that spilled more confidential stories than a teenager's diary. The intelligence community dismissed The Secret Man as a work of pretty low-effort fan fiction, and Dukes himself as a complete charlatan. But as always, Frank was able to maintain that this was just the CIA and the military denying his existence, because that's just how secret he was. Frank would eventually claim that he had never said he was employed by the CIA, despite, stating that he was the CIA's finest covert operative right on the front cover of his fucking book, and doing interviews where he talked about that one time where he was employed by the CIA.
And how long did you work for the CIA?
I worked directly for William Casey from
Frank's intelligence career can be defined entirely by its stunning lack of intelligence. When Frank Dukes finally shuffles off this mortal coil and goes to that great Kumite in the sky, I sincerely hope that his legacy won't be that of half-baked military fanfiction and sub-Austin Powers level James Bond rip-offs. Because despite his proclivity for spewing more bullshit than a malfunctioning slurry tank, Frank gave us the greatest gift anyone could have bestowed upon martial arts fans: Bloodsport. It's time to talk about the...
What's the whole up?
For years, the rumors have circulated.
those with an ear to the ground have heard fantastic tales of an invisible organization. An organization that sponsors an international, no-holds-barred tournament, pitting dedicated martial artists of all arts against each other in bare-knuckle kumite.
Taking Charlie.
In November of 1980, Black Belt magazine published an article with a little-known karate instructor called Kumite, a learning experience. The first sign that this was not your run-of-the-mill interview was the disclaimer that while Black Belt felt confident running the article, they were unable to verify many of the details of the instructor's fantastical tales. Tales of shadowy organizations that once every 5 years held a top-secret, invitation-only, bare-knuckle competition to determine who the world's deadliest martial artist was.
A lot of people liken it to a human cockfight. You've got to understand that Asia is lined with one secret society after another. And that's probably why the event has been kept secret for so long.
Fights could be won only by submission, KO, or death. That little-known instructor's name was Strength Fighter. No, wait, shit, it was Dukes. It was Frank Dukes. The article was the world's introduction to what Frank called the Kumite. The word Kumite is Japanese and generally translates to sparring. But in the topsy-turvy world of Frank Dukes, Kumite means roughly 1,170 people beating each other senseless over the course of 3 days in a top-secret, illegal, no-holds-barred fight to the death. The Black Belt article contains more wild inaccuracies than the average Steven Seagal shootout. At one point, they state that Dukes has no knowledge of previous competitions before proceeding to detail all of Frank's knowledge of previous competitions. He discusses at least 3 previous Kumites, and if we run the math on this, if Frank had knowledge of 3 previous Kumites by 1980, and he won his first Kumite at age 19, that means he has been competing in no-holds-barred death matches since the age of 9. Over the 6-page span of this interview, the reader is treated to more fantasy fight discussion than a schoolyard conversation about whose dad is the toughest. One year the Kumite was a mud wrestling match. One year it was held on a cone-shaped surface, and I still have trouble sleeping as my brain attempts to conjure an image of how in the name of the patron saint of professional fisting that is even possible. One of the many questions surrounding the Kumite that has never been answered is how many participants were there? According to Frank, every fighter fights 20 matches per day, and 3 matches are happening at all time. Every time a fighter loses, he exits the competition, so using what we know, how many competitors are there? After literal minutes of trying to work this out, I gave up and sought the help of the most advanced artificial intelligence the world has ever seen. ChatGPT is a deity born of code and bare metal, an oracle of silicone and semiconductors that stands as testament to man's recklessness in pursuit of unfettered technological advancement. An atom bomb with a user interface, a downloadable death knell for human thought. Yet even this, the most advanced AI known to man, was unable to make sense of the fucking Kumite. No matter how I plugged in the variables of Frank's Fantasy Fight Club, it gave me a different answer every time, ranging anywhere from 4 competitors to over 400. And look, I'm not trying to body shame anyone here, but one of the most unrealistic parts of this article is the fact that this man ever claimed he was a heavyweight. The fucking trophy looks like it weighs more than he does. Black Belt editor Jon Stewart would later apologize for publishing martial arts fan fiction in his martial arts fan fiction magazine. Stewart said, "Sometimes we get caught. Sometimes we were naive enough to think this added up." While the overall article is about as grounded in reality as Harry Potter's dream journal, Frank does make one Nostradamus-level prediction that is shockingly accurate. When asked about what type of fighters would be victorious in a style versus style competition such as the Kumite, Dukes put forward the idea that the key to winning was not being the best sumo wrestler or karateka, but being cross-trained in a number of styles. In an oddly prescient way, Frank predicted the rise of the mixed martial artists. 8 years after its publication, thanks in part to black belt editor Jon Stewart writing a note explaining Frank as the #1 ninja expert in the world, Hollywood opened its doors to Frank Dukes. In 1976, the Sex Pistols played a gig at the Manchester Lesser Free Trade Hall. It was a small gig and only a handful of people turned up. When they returned 3 weeks later, they played to an audience of hundreds and properly ushered in the era of British punk. In any other timeline, that first gig would have been forgotten, and their triumphant return a few weeks later would be the show everyone remembers. But for those few dozen people in attendance, that first night at the Lesser Free Trade Hall was the splitting of the punk atom and the show that would go down in history as possibly the most influential gig of all time. In attendance that night were future members of Joy Division and then New Order, The Smiths, The Fall, and 2 men who would go on to found the hugely influential Factory Records. All of these artists would later claim that this show was what convinced them to start a band. The ripple effect of that gig can still be felt today. Frank's Sex Pistols moment was the 1988 martial arts classic, Bloodsport.
A flying jump kick 7 feet in the air. A secret arena. And a deadly competition. An American ninja in Hong Kong. In pursuit of a dream and pursued by his own government. It's the stuff martial arts films are made of. Comic book heroes with supernatural abilities. But the most unbelievable part of Bloodsport is that it really happened.
And at the risk of turning this video into a movie review, I'm about to review this movie because Bloodsport is so good it makes decades of Frank's bullshit all seem worthwhile. It's difficult to know where to start when discussing a movie where every second of its runtime is somehow crammed with excellence. Do we start with young Frank and his Belgian by way of California with a hint of speech impediment accent?
You're not gonna call the cops?
Not if we make a deal.
What kind of a deal?
How about Ray Jackson absolutely owning every scene he's in?
Jackson, you gonna go to Hong Kong?
I love anything with full contact. Need a few more scars on my face.
I heard you get killed at that Kumite.
Only if you fuck up.
Okay, USA. USA.
Maybe the scene where Frank and Ray play 80s arcade game Karate Champ. Or maybe this guy. I don't know who he is, but he's clearly the Boba Fett of Bloodsport. He doesn't do much, but just look at how fucking cool this guy is. And what about this lovable rogue?
What's the whole out?
Bloodsport is a thorough retelling of Kumite, a learning experience, and was directed by Sheldon Lettich, who previously worked with Frank on the short movie Firefight. Sheldon said of Bloodsport, "I had known Frank for a number of months before I came up with the idea for Bloodsport. Frank told me a lot of tall tales, most of which turned out to be bullshit, but his stories about participating in this so-called Kumite event sounded like a great idea for a movie. Bloodsport is corny, it's badly acted by almost everyone involved, and its fight scenes do not hold up well in an era of John Wick doing Sambo on the back of a horse or whatever. But nonetheless, Bloodsport remains one of the best martial arts movies of all time. And in all seriousness, I just need to point out how much I absolutely love how grimy and oppressive the aesthetic of this movie is. Filmed on location in Hong Kong, it's one of the few movies to ever record scenes inside Kowloon Walled City before it was demolished in 1993. Every scene filmed there is strikingly brutal, and its visual influence can be seen in everything from Ghost in the Shell to Call of Duty Black Ops. A martial arts movie lives or dies by its action scenes, much like a musical is judged by its songs. Bloodsport is more or less non-stop action. From the moment young Frank pokes his head into Tanaka's window, it's wall-to-wall training montages, kinda sexual torture, dim mucks and death matches. The foil to Frank's all-American good guy, despite being a Canadian portrayed by a Belgian, is Chong Li. Frank insists Li is based on a real person who killed 6 people in one kumite. And can we just take a second to appreciate that Bolo Young, who played Chong Li, was 53 at the time? Look at this absolute unit. For contrast, here he is in Enter the Dragon 15 years earlier, looking virtually identical. For a film that garnered such a vast and dedicated following, Bloodsport was shockingly not particularly well received. Even today, its Metacritic score is a dismal 29, but its user score is 7.9, proving what anyone with common sense knew all along. That applying a points out of 10 scale to judge the merit of a piece of art, whose appreciation is subjective to each individual, is absolutely fucking pointless. Regardless of review scores, Bloodsport earned $50 million at the box office in its first year and spawned 3 sequels that I'd be willing to bet no one has ever seen.
But they should!
Because if I have to watch Bloodsport 4 The Dark Kumite, then I'm taking you down with me.
A champion. He triumphs in the Kumite, the ultimate contest of warriors. A cop.
I thought you were dead. You so long.
Take the shot. You got him.
He loses his chance to save another cop's life. Now, obsessed with revenge, he is driven over the line.
What the hell have you done?
To a prison where insanity reigns.
Take the shot, John!
Bloodsport 4, The Dark Kumite.
Okay, I realize this is the least of that trailer's problems.
Take the shot. You got him.
But that subtitle, The Dark Kumite? Really? The first Kumite had enough bodies at the end to fill a mass grave. How the fuck is it getting any darker than that?
I seem to misplace my pen.
Oh, I guess that's how. Sequels aside, Bloodsport's effect on pop culture was seismic. If you're an MMA fan, then you can probably give Bloodsport some small thanks for that. The idea of a no-holds-barred tournament, pitting fighters of various styles against each other, was undeniably influential on Art Davie and Horian Gracie when they came up with the first draft of the UFC. I mean, the original design of the octagon was going to be a flat surface surrounded by an alligator-filled moat, and if that doesn't sound like something straight out of the Kumite, then I don't know what does. Pop culture icons like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, games that took the idea of international secret fighting tournaments, also owe a debt of gratitude to Jean-Claude Van Damme, Sheldon Lettich, and through gritted fucking teeth, Frank Dukes. And while you can argue that Dukes basically just stole the idea of the Kumite from Enter the Dragon, and that his notions of combining all styles to be successful was essentially ripping off what Bruce Lee tried to do with Jeet Kune Do in the 70s, it doesn't change the fact that following the release of Bloodsport in '88, its influence could immediately be felt in everything from Street Fighter II in '91 to the UFC in 1993. Some of the greatest fighters of all time also cite Bloodsport as their gateway to martial arts. GSP, Anderson Silva and Bas Rutten to name but 3. One of the hardest pills to swallow in all of MMA is that an alternate timeline exists where Frank Dukes decides no one will ever buy this bullshit story about the Kumite, cancels his interview with Black Belt, and GSP grows up to become a paleontologist instead of a mixed martial artist. Movie Frank would go on to win the Kumite, avenge Senzo's honor, bone the ubiquitous love interest, and return to whatever top-secret espionage duties the army normally assigns to a sweaty-palmed 19-year-old. But not before we're treated to this screen. And for most people, this freeze frame provided near-fatal tonal whiplash. In a twist worthy of Shyamalan, Bloodsport goes from hokey martial arts movie to biopic in a split second, a move that is roughly as shocking as the end of the Terminator 2 director's cut.
What the fuck?
Years later, Sheldon Lettich discussed the reality of the Kumite and said, "There was one guy Frank introduced me to named Richard Bender, who claimed to have actually been at the Kumite event and who swore everything Frank told me was true. A few years later, this guy had a falling out with Frank and confessed to me that everything he told me about the Kumite was a lie. Frank had coached him in what to say." Till this day, Frank still claims that the Kumite is as undeniably real as gravity.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
But anyone with basic intelligence can see that the story has more holes in it than Batman's parents. Why has no other Kumite winner ever spoken about the competition? In its hundreds of years of existence, surely someone other than Frank would have been allowed to talk about it. If Frank is 329-0, how come none of his 329 opponents have ever been found? If he competed in the 1980 Kumite as he claimed, then how come his record never changed from 329-0? Frank claimed he set a record for fastest kick at 72 miles per hour, but how was it even possible for video cameras in the 1970s to measure the speed of kicks so accurately when they absolutely didn't have that kind of technology back then? And even if it was all recorded by high-speed cameras, why has none of that footage ever surfaced? Oh, wait, I apologize. Footage of the Kumite does exist. Frank silenced all his doubters when he released the shockingly real, unquestionable footage proving once and for all that the Kumite was real. But unfortunately, it was recorded on a Nokia 3310 that was covered in strawberry jam. The resulting video is so low resolution and monochromatic that Frank could claim to be fighting a mirror match against himself, and you'd have a hard time disproving it. Also, this looks suspiciously like footage from any one of the countless number of full-contact karate tournaments that took place in the 70s and 80s, not a secret illegal death match. The holy trinity of martial arts bullshitters are arguably Dukes, Ishida Kim, and Count Dante. There's a thread of deceit woven into the fabric of each man, an invisible yet indelible strand that links all three men at their very core. They all claim membership of the Black Dragon Fighting Society. The BDFS is either a secret society that has existed in the shadows for millennia, or a marketing gimmick started by Dante to sell copies of his deadliest fighting arts book. While he is considered by many to be a fake martial artist, Dante was allegedly a real criminal with a propensity for solving problems by blowing them the fuck up. And I unironically love everything about this man. Ishida Kim, as we all know, is the world's horniest ninja and original weeaboo. Kim claimed to have trained with Dante and been a student of the Black Dragons, and can be seen here doing the Kata Dante, which is either a deadly assassination method named after the Count himself, or a grown man having an upright seizure in the middle of an interpretive dance routine. Frank Dukes not only claims Black Dragon lineage, but the organizers of the Kumite were none other than the Black Dragon Fighting Society. Frank's spot in the Kumite was actually as an alternate for Dante himself after Dante was unable to compete due to being dead, possibly by death touch. A lot of people really want to believe in the Kumite, and I get it. Some of us grew up with battered VHS copies of Bloodsport, watched and rewatched until they invariably fell apart. It's a big part of a lot of people's lives, and the Kumite is fucking cool. It's real-life Street Fighter 2, and it makes style versus style fighting look badass instead of what it actually looks like, which is some ponytailed taekwondo dork getting savagely humped by a wrestler. But it's been 30 years, and there is still zero evidence the Kumite ever happened, at least the way Dukes described it. In order to believe in the Kumite, you have to have a childlike belief in an improbable narrative spun by a man whose life is defined by improbable narratives, while simultaneously ignoring the mountain of evidence to the contrary. In order for the Kumite to be real, Frank would have to be a man with a capital M. He would have to have unparalleled physical and mental strength, character, and determination. The kind of man who could complete such a mission because a normal person would be incapable. The agent would almost have to be a Superman to commit all of this. But Frank isn't Superman, and the Kumite isn't real.
We just got handed our asses.
Frank's later years were not kind to him. His martial arts career arguably peaked in 1993 when he did a live performance in Bercy Stadium, France. There, thousands of French people flushed money right down the toilet after they paid to watch him smash bottles that seemed suspiciously like sugar glass and punch his way through bulletproof glass. The downward spiral began later that year when Dukes was assaulted by former UFC heavyweight Zane Frazier at a martial arts convention. Despite Frank spending years training blindfolded in order to detect attacks from any angle, somehow a man who is 6'6" and 230 pounds snuck up behind him and sucker punched him. And while the idea of Frank's ninja training being completely useless in the exact scenario it was designed for is pretty hilarious, it was nevertheless a serious assault that Dukes claimed did lasting damage to him.
And it shows in my medical conditions. I had I have 4 square indentations in my skull from being hit with brass knuckles.
In Frank's version of the story, Frazier jumped him with a gang of UFC fighters who ultimately all got their asses kicked by Dukes. Because of course they did.
The CCTV cameras captured it. The CCTV cameras captured me fighting off 4 top fighters in the UFC. I won't mention their names.
Regardless of how it went down, the resulting injury forced Dukes to undergo a brain scan, the results of which were no laughing matter. Frank discovered he had been living with multiple brain tumors. Dukes even claimed that he wrote The Secret Man because he wasn't expecting to survive and wanted to get his 100% true life story out there before he died. Frank did survive, but not without significant cost. He was blinded in his left eye and suffered facial paralysis and memory loss. To further compound the fall of Frank, in 1994, his house was destroyed by an earthquake, and to add insult to injury, his wife left him. And in one of the most tragic bromance breakups since the dissolution of McLobov, Frank sued former friend and Bloodsport star Jean-Claude Van Damme for breach of contract over writing credits for the Van Damme movie The Quest. Dukes and Van Damme had been friends since Bloodsport in '88. Frank was even dating Van Damme's sister-in-law, but Dukes lost the court case and then lost an appeal, and the hottest martial arts power couple, Van Dukes, ceased to exist. But in his most unforgivable act, Dukes was allegedly offered 25 grand to assassinate Steven Seagal, and he didn't take the job.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
I'd be willing to concede that had Dukes performed a successful hit on legendary blues musician and dancehall icon Seagal, he'd be a celebrated figure in the martial arts community, and we'd all be a lot more accommodating of his tales of the Kumite. The rise of the internet was the death knell for Duke's career. While in the 1980s it was as easy as this to convince someone you were a CIA ninja.
Have you ever heard about a championship called the Kumite?
It's like the Super Bowl of martial arts. The winner is the Ultimate Warrior.
I am that champion.
Oh, cool.
The free exchange of information over the internet meant that suddenly it was a lot harder to convince people about your track record in no-holds-barred death matches. Ultimately, Dukes' greatest opponent would be the invention of search engines. All of which brings us to today. Dukes is still telling anyone who'll listen that the Kumite is real, that Senzo is real, that he really did become king of the ninjas at 16, that he really did get recruited into the CIA in a public restroom at age 19, and many, many other tall tales. And in a weird way, I admire that. He is nothing if not dedicated to maintaining his fantasy kingdom, and it might be surprising to hear after literally everything I've said over the last hour, but I like Frank Dukes. Frank represents a period in martial arts that can never and will never exist again. A time when you can tell someone that you were a ninja and all you had to do was make a kind of claw shape with your fingers and they'd probably believe you. A time when you didn't immediately dismiss the dim mak as being complete nonsense. It was stupid and it was goofy, but it had character. Here we are 40 years later still talking about Kim and Dukes because they were characters. If anyone's still talking about the latest Dagestani wrestler to hump his way across the UFC in 40 years' time, I'll be genuinely shocked. Maybe because I grew up with a dad who scared the living shit out of me with his tales of the witch who lived in the woods nearby, or that every scratch on his weather-beaten hands had been caused by a tiger he'd wrestled at work that day. But I have a pretty high tolerance for bullshit artists like Dukes. But after months of writing and researching Frank, I still feel no closer to any kind of understanding of who he really is. Every facet of his existence is so completely wrapped up in stories straight out of a Bond movie, and he is so ruthlessly committed to maintaining them that at times even I found myself wondering if his entire life is one colossal house of lies, or if he really is the most interesting man alive. If Dukes came clean and admitted everything was a lie, I genuinely think he'd be viewed a lot more favorably. Sort of like a Jordan Belfort, Wolf of Wall Street style conman. The kind of lovable rogue who can go from villain to hero in the public eye with one good biopic. But Frank's realm of fantasy is holding fast. He does not waver in its defense. He is, and will remain forever, the secret man.
Confirming that.
God is dead. God remains dead. And we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it?
There are images of one fighter who was so badly disfigured by this event, he was unrecognizable.
But I feel like I have to speak out on just how senseless and dangerous I feel like it is as a doctor.
This is clearly a concussion, and we should not be advocating for a sport that is based around concussions.
And if it's too gruesome and you don't like it, I got the solution for you. Don't watch it.
What is Power Slap?
Power Slap.
Power Slap is a sexy new combat sport for a sexy new decade. Contestants take turns delivering the hardest strike possible until man fall over. Bonus points are awarded if they fall over funny.
Power Slap.
Slap fighting as a sport has been around for some time now, garnering huge views on both YouTube and the Fifth Circle of Hell. Like the combat sports equivalent of the Habsburg Jaw, slap fighting is an unnatural devolution of fighting enjoyed mostly by enthusiasts of inbreeding. If you could argue that crack cocaine is just a hyper-efficient version of caffeine, then slap fighting is an incredibly efficient way of seeing people get knocked out. So if all you care about in your combat sports is seeing someone have the memory of their grandparents' shift deleted from their brain, slap fighting is the kind of time saver you're looking for. No longer do you have to worry about sitting through 3, 5, or God forbid 12 rounds of fighting in order to see a human being get permanent and irreversible brain damage. Almost every single slap fighting video practically guarantees you'll see a person get forcibly ejected from reality and spend the rest of their life wondering why they keep putting their cell phone in the fridge, and all in less time than it takes to cancel a Fight Pass subscription. If all of this sounds like something you'd be interested in, Dana White has you covered. While the majority of early slap fighting videos originated from relatively unknown Eastern European promotions and featured such combat sports luminaries as that guy with the synthol biceps and Slavic Frank Zappa, Dana realized that the best slap fighting begins at home. After a promotional tour in a Cabo nightclub on New Year's Eve, Dana launched his very own big-budget slap fighting league in America.
There's actually technique to this thing, believe it or not.
Power Slap was born.
Power Slap.
Power Slap may be the single worst idea from someone with more money than sense since Andrew Tate Instagrammed his lunch. But Dana's slap-based passion project isn't the first time someone with ties to the UFC has tried to reinvent MMA through a lens of unbridled idiocy.
I'm going under depression now.
Even the most talented artists are capable of producing masterworks of garbage. Every FromSoft has a Ninja Blade, every Francis Ford Coppola a Godfather 3, and every Metallica has an Everything They Did post and Justice for All.
Cool.
And for Art Davie, the man who co-created the UFC, there's X-Arm. It's the early 1990s. Hair metal is taking its dying breath. Depression is going mainstream. And a Japanese promotion called Shuto was doing MMA before the term MMA had even been coined. But much like PlayStation 2 Brawler, Garuden, Breakblow, Fist or Twist, it was just a bit too niche for Western audiences at the time. Fortunately, former car salesman and devout hat wearer Art Davie had the solution. After an argument about whether boxing was better than wrestling ended with Davie being wrestle-humped by his friend, he spent the next years planning what would ultimately become the King of Iron Fist tournament, the Ultimate Fighting Championship.
I actually was a poor amateur boxer. And a friend brought a wrestler over to me back in '65 on the beach out in Hampton Bays, Long Island. And I got humbled by being taken down, and he put a hold on me, and I thought, we're about the same size. I couldn't land up. We were just, sparring, and it went south on me, and I never forgot that.
In 1993, with the help of Gracie family royalty Horie and Gracie, Davey co-created and co-produced UFC 1, and the rest is history. But in 2001, only 8 years into the lifespan of MMA, the UFC's parent company SEG was bankrupt. Davey decided this Ultimate Fighting thing was clearly just a fad, like a steroid-fueled fidget spinner. He sold his stake in the UFC for $2 million to Zuffa, turned his back on the sport he helped create, and unwittingly ushered in the era of Dana White. In the intervening years, Davey had to watch as his very own Frankenstein's monster evolved from a fringe spectacle of flying teeth and testicle pounding to the fastest growing sport in the world. The UFC went on to be more successful than Davey could ever have imagined, like an MMA Beyoncé to Davey's Rest of Destiny's Child. After 7 years on the outside looking in, a time which saw him unsuccessfully pitch ideas for new fight promotions to networks like Showtime, in 2008, Davey prodigal sonned his way back into the world of combat sports. He was approached by a TV production company in Seattle called Piranha Entertainment, and in what many experts agree may have possibly been a meth-induced fugue state, Piranha offered a blank check to Davey for use in creating an alternative to the UFC. Davey said, "Rather than trying to compete with the UFC, which I thought would take 100 million, I should go back to my greatest strength, which is creativity." After seeing what he would eventually create, I would say there's an argument to be made that Davey's choice in dapper headwear is a greater strength than his creativity. After a pitch meeting that one can only assume was so intoxicant-fueled that the breakout room was a vomitorium, Davey and the executives at Piranha settled on their idea for a new, extreme, UFC-beating combat sport. A combat sport for the digital age. A combat sport that didn't have all that boring ground fighting shit that the public hated. A combat sport that would make the gymnasticoid gods of ancient Greece weep tears of joy ever they gaze upon its countenance.
Well, Art, you are the godfather of the UFC, and now you've come up with what I believe to be possibly something that may top that X-Arm.
Can I laugh in your face?
That sport was WTF. World Tethered Fighting. But then they realized what most people associate the acronym WTF with and changed the name to X-Arm, Extreme Arm Wrestling.
X-Arm is a brand new combat sport, and it combines the best of hardcore arm wrestling, kickboxing, and jiu-jitsu.
Combining any combat sport with hardcore arm wrestling is a bit like combining Meshuggah's Bleed with your sex mix. Shit is about to get real weird real fast, and at least one person will be scarred for life. Davey teamed up with Todd Williams, owner of an MMA promotion called Gladiator Challenge. Gladiator Challenge has been around since 1999, and yet somehow still hasn't figured out this whole YouTube thumbnail lark. Together, they set up what they called an idea lab, where Williams supplied the fighters and Davey supplied the worst ideas for a sporting mashup since Slam Ball. Composing the extreme part of extreme arm wrestling, fighters were tethered to a table, their wrists bound by duct tape, and over 3 one-minute rounds were allowed kick, punch, and attack submissions at will. Or they could, try and pin their opponent's arm like in traditional arm wrestling. But once people started punching across the table like an argument over who's paying for dinner got out of hand, the arm wrestling portion of X-Arm was largely forgotten.
Yeah, I see some battle wounds and some bruises. That's great.
Very few X-Arm videos exist today, but of what remains, roughly 0 fights are actually won via a traditional arm wrestling pin, while the rest are won via frantically winging haymakers over a table. X-Arm was labelled by Davey as the roughest 3 minutes in sport, a title that nowadays belongs to the final 3 minutes of Shevchenko versus Grasso. Unsurprisingly, X-Arm was a staggering failure. Nobody was clamoring for a sport that looked like the answer to the question, what happens if the Quiznos cashier I'm about to rob puts up a fight? And the MMA media at the time were scathing in their appraisal. X-Arm had a shorter lifespan than a low-effort TikTok and was cancelled after 1 season.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
But Davey wasn't done trying to make X-Arm happen, and credit where it's due, for everything X-Arm did wrong, which was basically everything, it did get some things right. Davey was focused on making X-Arm a sport for the digital age, which was pretty forward-thinking for 2008. The narrow viewing space required by 2 men tied to a table meant X-Arm was perfect for being watched on a phone. And when Davey relaunched X-Arm in 2012, he partnered with former YouTube behemoth Machinima. With 12 million subscribers, Machinima were the Walt Whitmans of 360 no-scope COD videos. Machinima would stream episodes of the new and improved X-Arm Season 2, and presumably would upload BroStep-powered headshot montages from X-Arm FU, the official X-Arm mobile game.
Pin! He's going for the pin! He is pinned!
You'd think with such a YouTube titan to piggyback off, there would be dozens of X-Arm videos still out there for us to have a good chuckle at. But Machinima was a glorified pyramid scheme. Creators submitted videos, while Machinima made all the money from the views and shared only pennies with the original creators. Once monetization and ad revenue became available to everyone with over 1,000 subscribers, the Machinima pyramid was inverted and placed them right on the bottom. After years of allegations of ripping off creators, Machinima eventually dim-macked their own channel, deleting every single video, along with X-Arm Season 2's entire catalogue. Barely a year into its relaunch, X-Arm was killed off, this time for good. There were no official announcements or press conferences. X-Arm simply ceased to be. The final social media post by X-Arm was from May 1st, 2013, a post that simply reads, X-Arm gets great response at MIP TV in Cannes. 11 people have liked that post in the intervening decade. Facebook user Kenny McLaren exclaimed, "That's awesome. When is the next event? Can't wait to be part of it." Kenny is still waiting for his answer. X-Arm was a terrible idea, but it had its fans, such as this rando blog post from StrengthFighter.com. Many people says it's shit, but I say it's great, so fuck the haters and keep going. But unfortunately, I'm not in the majority, and the masses don't think like me, so this exciting sport isn't about to took off. I'm not sure if Strength Fighter realized when he wrote this post in 2014 that X-Arm had already been dead for over a year. Art Davey hasn't created any UFC-beating combat sports since then. His most recent involvement with combat sports was being inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. As for the fighters themselves, very little information exists about any of the competitors. The only competitor with any name recognition was former Pride and UFC legend Gary Goodridge, but no footage of him competing in X-Arm exists. Of the remaining cast members, only Homer Moore and Rick Vardell are of any note, and for all the wrong reasons. Before becoming X-Arm heavyweight champion, Homer Moore was an MMA fighter